So thank you. And here we go. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 16th, 2020 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. This meeting is in accordance with executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be available via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-853-5247. That's 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID number 941-3631-2895. That's 941-3631-2895. This information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of CTN, or of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. And we will start with a roll call.
Commissioner Woods. I see you. Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Abrams. Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here.
Great. Looks like we have quorum.
You do?
And do we have any introductions this evening?
No.
Great. Do I have a commissioner that will move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Briggs. Any discussion or changes? Mr. Leonard.
I just want to point out a revised agenda was sent out. You'll recall that the minutes were delivered late in advance of the last meeting, and the original agenda did not carry those forward. That's been updated, so please be working for the agenda that includes minutes for both May 19th and June 2nd.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the agenda for this evening? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? All right, it is approved. Before us this evening, we have the minutes from the May 19th, 2020 meeting, as well as the June 2nd, 2020 meetings. Do I have a commissioner that will move those? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Woods. Any changes or discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, those are approved. We now come to the report section of our meeting, and we will begin with our City Council Representative, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to see everyone. City Council met last night on a few updates, one of which is specifically land use related, or I should say zoning and site plan related, and then the others are more having to do with transportation, but I thought you would be interested in them. The rezoning and redevelopment of 3611 and 3621 Plymouth Road, if you'll remember, that's the Red Roof Inn with the big boy attached to it, the now closed big boy attached to it. That was heard at first reading, so just the rezoning, not yet the site plan. It did pass, although there was significant concern with respect to the use of the planned project, with many colleagues suggesting PUD would be more appropriate. We'll have more opportunity to discuss the site plan and the details associated with the planned project, but wanted to provide that feedback. Also, City Council passed a resolution in support for the countywide road and non-motorized millage that will be on the ballot in August 2020, so this August. It's a half-mil millage that will be going to voters. It will last 4 years and will support road projects around the county, but also a significant portion will go to non-motorized projects that will enhance our ability to enjoy our parks across the county and connect from park to park by bike, walking, or running. So excited. There are a number of projects relevant to Ann Arbor taxpayers in particular. Ann Arbor being the largest community in Washington County will receive a fair amount of that attention through that millage. So it benefits us as well and allows us to spend our city road dollars on other projects and non-motorized projects as well. So it's a win-win from a city perspective. We also heard 2 resolutions to advance the Healthy Streets Initiative, which is to close portions of parking or roadway, especially cut down through traffic on major bypasses that people use to cut from one major artery to another through neighborhoods, to really allow people to get out in a socially distanced manner, enjoy their neighborhoods, enjoy downtown in the midst of the COVID pandemic. These were postponed for the next 3 weeks, and there's a good likelihood that they won't move forward simply because the staffing required after those 3 weeks and the efficacy of it just may not be there. And then finally, we passed a resolution to ask Sam Schwartz, who's our transportation planning and engineering consultant who we've been engaged with on our transportation master plan for the last couple years now, to also do an assessment and inventory of a sample of our pedestrian crossings and similar amenities with an eye towards Vision Zero and their expertise in that field to ensure we're up to best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, do you have a report for us this evening?
Briefly, I just have 2 items for the Ordinance Revisions Committee meeting scheduled for June 23rd. We will be diving into proposed amendments to the planned project ordinance, apropos to the conversation apparently that was conducted at the City Council meeting last evening. Also, I just wanted to follow up. The City Council and thus planning services will be following that lead, intends to continue to conduct virtual meetings into July. There has been some analysis of the best way to do that. We believe that there is an effective way to do that in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, be it with or without a specific extension of the governor's executive order in that regard. So that is my intention, to continue to do so for the purposes of continuing to do what we can to prevent any spread of the COVID-19 virus. So you will see that things will continue to look the same going into July. And at this point, I would anticipate August as well. I am going to sort of keep it on sort of a month-to-month decision-making process from a planning services perspective. But given our ability to meet effectively, my intention is to sustain this method probably for the foreseeable future. So I know that questions come up a couple of times. If you have any questions or concerns in that regard, please don't hesitate to let me know. And that's all.
When we actually do meet in person, I'm going to give all of you a really big hug. So hopefully that will happen at some point.
Maybe through Visqueen.
Possibly. All right. Planning Commission officers and committees. All right, seeing no one. Written communication, we did get a little bit of written communication, including some e-comments that were sent out this evening. We now move to audience participation. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. To comment on such other matters, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 941-3631-2895. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
No callers currently on the line indicating, but let's just give it a few moments if we can.
Sounds good.
Nope, nobody indicating a desire to speak.
Moving on to public hearings for our next business meeting, Mr. Leonard.
Shuffling papers here that I'm tracking. We have several projects scheduled for consideration at our July 7th meeting. One new item and 2 returning items. The first item is proposed amendments to Chapter 55 of the Unified Development Code to amend parking standards to require electric vehicle infrastructure for new development projects. These proposed amendments would require a combination of electric vehicle chargers, readiness, and infrastructure future proofing, if you will, to accommodate electric vehicles in the future. They will be required on a percentage of the total parking requirements. They would apply to all new projects considered for development through the City Council site plan review process. Additionally, we have 2 returning projects. One is the Valhalla Ann Arbor site plan annexation and rezoning for City Council. This is a proposed multifamily residential project for 450 units of townhomes. And I would just note this one was previously postponed. However, because it was not postponed with a date certain, my apologies for not prompting that. We did renotice this item so that anybody who's interested in it will be aware of when it's returning on the agenda. Additionally, West Liberty Townhomes was postponed to the date certain of July 7th, so that will also be appearing on the July 7th agenda.
Great, thank you. We now move on to unfinished business, and the only item in this section for us this evening is the 2800 Jackson Road Hotels rezoning and site plan for City Council approval. We will begin with the petitioner's presentation. The petitioner will have up to 10 minutes to address the Planning Commission. We will then head to Mr. Kowalski for a staff report. I'll open up the public hearing after that, and then we'll head into discussion. So I will just wait a minute as Mr. Leonard allows our petitioners to enter the meeting.
Chris Abbo is on, but he's our audio only.
Everybody seeing the presentation okay? Scott, would you like to take it away? You have 10 minutes.
Sure. Well, we were requested to take a look at approximately 8 different items. The first being access points to the site, being 2, whether we could limit it to 1. This was not recommended by the fire department. They need 2 access points to the site, and they said that having 1 would not work for them. So we moved on to the second request, being to make it a one-way traffic through those access points. Again, the fire department did not recommend that either because of the 26-foot wide driveway requirements and the apparatus firefighting equipment. They need to be within 15 feet of the building. So from that, we went to access from the neighboring property. The ownership did try several times to contact the neighbors with that shopping center. We did look at it roughly in terms of how to access through that. It would require the shopping center to have a whole new site plan. And we would lose quite a few parking spaces on both sides. So we moved away from that one. We're taking that his non-return of our phone call as a no on having access through his property. Again, we discussed the bioswale and the bioswale plantings as requested with urban forestry. Our new plans were approved by urban forestry, and we worked with them to create those plants. As well as our transformer, we did have a transformer that was hidden by the wrong type of planting. We do have plant materials per discussion with urban forestry that they agreed with that would be more in keeping in the screening of that transformer. We had some revised, as requested, some revised plantings up in front to hide the parking lot right at the front of the home too. Again, we worked with discussions with urban forestry, and we do have our landscape architect on with us. They both agreed on this new planting and evergreen planting that would not obscure pedestrians from the cars exiting or entering the site. Revising the building or revising the home 2 towards Jackson Road. What we had done there is added more fenestration, pronounced the gray block element in the center of the, yeah, it's page 13. There we go. Oops. In the center of the facade. I raised the canopy up so it's more in keeping, there is a 4-foot difference between the sidewalk and our finished floor. The finished floor is lower than the sidewalk. So I raised that up to be more in scale with the human scale, as well as added more fenestration going up the gray block, as well as on either side of the centerpiece being a 2-story glass, trying to break it up and make it look more inviting and more of a front of a building. We did add a trellis feature at the front of the building, which wraps around, very similar to the one in front of at the front entrance. But we kept that to planting only underneath, only because it's outside rooms and the brand would not appreciate having people sit directly outside the guest rooms. And I think that pretty much covers what we had been asked to do. And I welcome any questions. And Andy Wakeland, our civil engineer, is on board. The owner, Chris Abbo, is on board, as well as the landscape architect from Andy's office.
Great, thank you so much. We'll now move to Mr. Kowalski for a staff report.
Okay, we all hear me now? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. I don't have a lot to add to the presentation. I can confirm that, the issues were addressed. We reviewed all of the landscaping issues with, I've had additional conversations with the with the landscape reviewer on that, so those are acceptable. Regarding the traffic changes to the traffic plan, that was also something that has been ongoing. Actually, up until about an hour ago, I saw another email from the fire marshal that, well, earlier we had met with the traffic engineer and the fire marshal last week with staff to discuss the proposed changes and what would be acceptable and what would not be acceptable. Petitioner's responses are correct. That does summarize. Just as of about an hour ago, we did get confirmation from the fire marshal again. One of the changes that the traffic engineer did want regarding the right turn only was not just signage, but an actual physical constraint to prevent people from going that way. The fire marshal, as I said, just about an hour ago, had no objections to that. She said as long her main concerns are fire trucks can turn right from the westbound entrance, and fire trucks could turn left into that. So with that arrangement, these are still things, I don't think I'll still need to confirm the actual physical changes on the plan and get those signed off. But again, everybody, the traffic engineer as well as the fire marshal, has agreed to that modification put forth. And that's really my summary at this time. Thank you. And staff is still recommending approval of both the site plan as well as the rezoning request.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about 2800 Jackson Road rezoning and site plan. Public comment may be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID 941-3631-2895. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
One moment, please. Nobody's indicating a desire to speak.
Okay. I will close the public hearing and I will read the 2 motions. Or actually, I'm sorry. We have, yes, 2 motions on this. Motion number 1, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the 2800 Jackson Avenue Hotels development rezoning from R5 to C3 Fringe Commercial. Second motion is the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the 2800 Jackson Avenue Hotels development site plan and development agreement. We'll have a commissioner that will move the 2 motions, moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal, and we are in discussion. Commissioner Sauvé and then Commissioner Gibrandal.
I want to do one clarifying point for the adjacent property, the front parking lot. It was mentioned in the presentation that it would require site planning to connect, but the front parking lot, there's a cut that goes right to the property line if you look on the site survey plan. So I want to understand how they would be required to do site planning if you connected there, for the fact that we've been looking at other properties that are putting a driveway up to the property line to connect in the future.
Sure, I can answer that. It would still, I mean, in most cases, I know you're speaking to the front parking lot closer to Jackson. And you're right, it's closer, it requires less modification in the rear area. However, it's a change of internal circulation. So in that case, it would be minor. It would be minor in their changes to their plan. It could be administrative. However, they don't have a site plan on file. So because they don't have a site plan on file, it would trigger an entire site plan. But it does trigger an internal rearrange. It's a change in circulation. So we would have to run that as administrative amendment. We run it by the traffic reviewer. We have to make sure aisle widths are consistent. So things like that, because we don't have consistent measurements. The parking lot has never been site planned. So we would have to confirm those items. So in most cases, it could just take an administrative amendment, which you're right is relatively easy process. So that's why as we go through these processes, and sometimes we do try to set these up so that in the future, the adjacent sites can just relatively easily, but because they don't have any site plan on file, it would trigger a full site plan review for that site.
Okay, that's helpful because the circumstance I'm looking at, we've had
Yes.
these and very recent, and I'm like, is this actually a scenario we think we're setting up for success that would actually trigger this? So knowing it's that there isn't a site plan on file is a tipping point. Okay, that was just kind of one of the, because I really didn't understand like what any modifications to the opposite site would have to do with it. And then I guess I just procedurally with the right turn and that curb to limit physically, that's just something that staff would be able to review between now and city council.
Yes, we would make sure that as I said, the traffic engineers already pretty much okayed it, and so has the fire marshal, but we just want to get the actual plans resubmitted that show that on there. And they may have been already, the engineer may comment. As I said, a lot of this was developing in the last couple days and even up to, as I said, a couple hours ago.
I appreciate a lot of design changes. I still think the multiple curb cuts here, you know, unfortunately that we can't tie in, and, you know, we have to have these so close together with the fire marshal. It's unfortunate, but it's not kind of something at the petitioners level either. So I guess we make do. Thank you.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
I just want to express my gratitude for all of the changes that you all responded to for the landscaping in particular. So thank you for taking the time to go through all that and to come up with what I think is a better plan. So I just appreciate you all being flexible and making those changes. And I do think the facade looks a lot better too. So I also appreciate you really rethinking that and making it, it just feels a little bit less stock hotel. And a little bit more fine-tuned and fine-grained, and I appreciate your effort with that. So
Thank you.
that's my comment.
Further discussion, Commissioner Briggs, followed by Commissioner Mills.
I just wanted to echo the same comments. Thank you for taking the time to make the project better. Obviously, it was, I'm sure, time you were looking forward to spending, but it is a much better project, I think, for the community now, and it really is aesthetically a lot better from the front, and the trellis looks wonderful, and the facade and the planting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mills.
I'll echo the same thing. I also wanted to add that, acknowledge that we got communication in our packet from someone who was talking about the number of EV charging stations that are provided, and acknowledging that right now our code doesn't require any. And so it's fantastic. I appreciate that you are providing 4. I don't know if you were on the call earlier to hear that one of the things that we're taking up at the next public hearing is a revamping of all of our parking ordinances to require EV charging. And one of the, at least as proposed right now, hotels would require a whole lot of effectively, underground cables to be run, not necessarily the chargers hooked up now, but to be ready to be more EV capable in the future. In part because the cars that are parking there overnight, right? Like that's a good place to be charged. The reason I would just bring this up, one of the arguments is that you may or may not know that the city council just approved our carbon neutrality goals and our carbon neutrality plan, which aims for the city to be carbon neutral in the next decade. So the city is going to be doing lots to be moving towards that. And part of that is electrifying the fleet to the extent possible. It's a whole lot cheaper to put in that infrastructure under the parking lots now than it is to have to retrofit it 10 years from now when there's a lot more EVs on the road, or 20 years from now. I mean, your hotel's going to last far longer than that. And so what you have right now is fine. Hotels that we may see, proposals for hotels that we see a couple months from now may well be required to have a whole lot more of that infrastructure, which I hope puts them at a competitive advantage, just because I think that it's going to be cheaper for them than to meet customer demand. So I would just put it on the table that this is fine for now. As you're thinking about constructing, laying some of the conduit under that parking lot might be wise. This would be effectively grandfathered in if we do change the ordinance, but I just wanted to put that on the table. And also acknowledge, thank you for comments from the public. Like, we do read them, so thanks.
So if I could speak to that, one of the bigger things than the conduit is really upsizing the electrical system because of the power draw. And this ownership does do that for future benefits. And one is the power charging stations. So they're already aware and willing to do things like that.
Thank you. Yes, we had a lot of discussions with GTE about where the cost is associated with that. So I appreciate bringing that up. Like if you can have those discussions now, if you know that in the future you may want to add more chargers, making sure that your service is able to handle that now rather than doing the retrofit later, that apparently adds a lot of money.
Right. This industry is so dynamic that the NAMU Hotel Group does try to plan ahead as much as they can, because there's a lot of changes in the hotel industry. This is one of them. There are several others. So we try to look ahead. Don't always get it, but electrical is one of the spots where we do have room.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Further discussion? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I want to fourth or fifth the thank you for the work that you guys did in addressing all of our comments. The facade to me facing Jackson Road looks so much better. One request, and I think this is more for staff. I went back just now to the meeting minutes to look at, because I couldn't find anywhere where we got to see what the facade looked like until we just saw the presentation. So I went back because I couldn't remember what it looked like 2 weeks ago. Is it possible in these presentations, if there's significant building facade changes, that they show before and after? Can we require that as part of the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
We can.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. My other question is also probably for staff, though the petitioner might know. I'm just curious, we just approved a hotel project on Plymouth Road. There's this one. Our next item on the agenda is a hotel project. Is there this much demand for hotels in Ann Arbor?
Great question. Scott, would you like me to speak on that?
I would, Chris.
That's a question I get asked often, just because we have one of the larger hotel portfolios in the area, and we have a presence in Ann Arbor and specifically on Jackson Road. So our two hotels on Jackson are the Hampton Inn and the Wyndham Garden. I was involved in the opening of the Hampton Inn, and as we ramped up, we saw the demand and we see the star reports for the market. And obviously we're in a current situation where there is uncertainty, I would say. So we feel confident building in this uncertainty due to the reports that we have seen in the past. And one of the best examples that we have is our Hampton Inn Ann Arbor was broke ground during that recession in 2008 and 9. And we had hesitation. I think if we had built through the uncertainty and opened in 2013 rather than 16, we would have reaped the benefits of those years. So we're going to stick with our long-term plan. We've owned the property for a long time. We've spent some real good quality time with selecting the team that we have here, and good lead architects and owner representatives and civil engineers. So we're not that we're taking our time. We just want to do our due diligence and make sure that we're in compliance with the city. So we're eager to build this. And yes, I do understand the question, but the Ann Arbor market has been probably one of the most underserved as far as growth, and it's now catching up. And I think the balance of the rooms on Jackson more towards the competitive areas in Ann Arbor is where the balance needs to be. So we feel very comfortable with our locations and our brand. So the brand specifically is an extended stay that I think will complement Jackson. It's what is much needed. And then we're gonna have I would call it an eclectic brand, an up and coming brand with the A-Loft, where the Marriott brand is looking to have has been looking to have an A-Loft in Ann Arbor for quite some time, and we're happy to bring that to Ann Arbor. So we don't want to have concern with the uncertainty that we see the market in now. We're looking at long term, and we're confident in the product and the location.
That's really helpful context. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Woods.
Thank you. I too want to echo that. We appreciate the changes that were made, and they look so much better. I have a question actually for staff in terms of the facade changes. Should we expect that what's on paper is what we are actually going to see when the buildings finally are there, because I know that there have been some examples in the past, not necessarily hotels, but other buildings where what was expected looked differently from what eventually occurred. And I think the big example is the one over on State Street, what is it, Corner Lofts or something like that. So I just wanted to know from staff, should we expect that what we see is what we're going to get?
Yes, great question. Yes, we have, with this project, it does include a development agreement with this. As part of the language within that development agreement states that the developer, the plans that were submitted and approved by city council, they have to build those plans with minor exception, or they have to go back, they have to modify the plan again. So yes, I can assure you, unless they want to go back and change that, the plan you see as it goes forward to city council, if that plan is approved, that will be locked in with the development agreement. So yes.
Further discussion? All right, I think we're ready for a vote. All those, or Mr. Leonard, do you want a roll call for this one?
If I could. Commissioner Woods,
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
It's approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
We are moving on to the next item on our agenda, which we are heading into regular business. And the next item on our agenda, 10A, is Home 2 Hotel Site Plan for City Council approval. And we will begin with the petitioner presentation, which will last 10 minutes or less. We'll then head to a staff report, followed by a public hearing, and then discussion and a vote.
Mr. Andre, will you be doing the presentation?
I am. I just, it looked like it was rebooting for a moment, so hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yep, hold on, let me pull up your presentation here.
It'd be great. And while you're pulling that up, I want to introduce another member of the team that'll be on here. Ben Burr from Think Shop Architects will also be. And what I'd like to do is, again, my name's Andy Andre, be going through the project with you. Again, this is a hotel, and I thought, I think as Commissioner Hammerschmidt had brought up, it's a great starting point. We talk about hotels and about the demand, and I can honestly tell you that Ann Arbor probably is the single most sought after market still within the hospitality industry because of the diversity that is offered within the community, between the business, the university, and the attractiveness of the community. And so while I agree there with the prior applicant, there is still a demand. And on the projects that we conduct, there is a market study that's done. The market study came back again, supported this. And it was a good indication of the overall strength of Ann Arbor, and then the projected strength as well. It's one of the things that we want to look at. We don't want to just want to know about the now. We also want to know about the 5 years and beyond. And when we do hotels, just like the other developers that do it, it's a long-term it's a long-term commitment to it. 20 plus years, I think. As Ms. Mills may have said earlier, it's a long-term thing. And so even while we might be in a little bit of a down market right now, the overall outlook is projected over an extended period of time. And it was brought up during the previous project, is the brand has a lot to do with it. So again, this is a home two as well. And you might say, well, wow, how can we have two home twos within Ann Arbor? They are in much different locations. And when you look at where the Jackson Road is, proximity to the highway, as opposed to where we are, and one of the slides, if we can go to the next one, or I don't know if I have control, right. So Hilton Home 2 is an all suites extended stay hotel. The amenities that are offered, full kitchens, it's more of a home feel. You have other extended stays, and you're seeing that more in the market, especially in Ann Arbor, where you're going to capture people anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 days at a time. And that's really, I think, where the market is going. That's what's filling in right now. And so while hotels continue to go on, and there will be a time where it's going to hit saturation. There's no two ways about it. Just like banks did at one time, just like pharmacies and the like did, it'll reach a point. But what you're seeing now are infills to fill in the market gaps, and it's specifically on the extended stay. And Home 2 is a strong product within the Hilton portfolio that'll offer amenities to the guests that a lot of people are seeking these days. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we talked about the location. I brought that up a little bit. And while there might be another Home 2 that was on the agenda and you just passed, these are in drastically different locations. And when you look at one of the things that it came back to it is when we were looking at this property from a due diligence perspective, you look at it and you go, yeah, I can see it. I can see the hotel. But then what you really have to look at is the area. And when you look at what is supporting within that area between, the accessibility to shopping, dining, we have Waymarket Park that abuts directly to the south of us. And then obviously with the university, U of M Stadium is about just over a mile away, walking distance. And then the other thing that I think is underscored a little bit, but I will tell you, your staff did a very good job in this in working through it, is the public transportation. So the ride is right out in front of us. We have multiple stops right along Eisenhower. So the accessibility to the public transportation and all these other factors drive the superiority, I think, of this location. And in what we did is in developing our site plan and what we were doing, you'll kind of see some of those things come through. Go to the next one. So when we look at the property, you can kind of see the location of the property overall. It's kind of in an area of what I would think is transition. It's in a parcel zoned O. The hotel is a permitted use within the zoning, but you also have to think about fit. How does it fit as well? Just because it meets the zoning doesn't always mean it's a good fit. But when you look at transition, and specifically, I thought it was interesting within the ordinance, within the code, it talks about a transitional use. Hotels, and in particular extended stay hotels, are great transitional pieces of property between more residential and then commercial. To the west of us, across Signature, we have, there's condos there, so there's multiple family directly to the west. And then obviously, as you progress further to the east, you get into the more of the commercial. The fire department is right along us, and then you get into the mall. And so a hotel, because even though it is commercial, it's more residential in nature. So it really does and specifically the extended stay offers a great transition between those uses. So I think it makes a good fit here. And you can see that we're 115 rooms at this point. Okay, thank you. To give you a little bit of a blow up in where we're at. So right on the corner of Eisenhower and Signature, there's an existing building that's on the corner. The area that you see in red, that's actually the property. It's a combination of a couple different pieces of property. So there's quite a bit of open space that's there. We have, just to give you an idea, you can kind of see, it's a little bit difficult to read, but the topography of the property rolls to the south, so it goes down along Signature. We have about 17 feet of grade change across this little piece of property. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but in every challenge there's an opportunity. And so we took and incorporated a lot of that elevation change within our design. And I think what we're going to end up with a very attractive layout that'll kind of transition as you're going down Signature. That site and the building kind of will flow with you. As you look at the proposed site plan, it's 115 rooms. We're meeting the setback requirements. We've really, we were highly encouraged, I would say. I think staff did a very good job. We went through many iterations with this project, and I think where we arrived is probably the best layout that we did come up with, in that it's situating the building along as far to the rear as we can, and then meeting the setbacks both along Eisenhower and Signature. And in doing that, our parking field is all consolidated within, I'll call it the rear of the property, where we can be most effective in that. As part of as we had talked about the location, we had the opportunity. We have an existing pathway that runs along Eisenhower, so you can see we have multiple points of pedestrian connectivity that we're encouraging the guests to use, obviously, as well as multiple points of connectivity along Signature as well. As may have been brought up, and I know you guys have been through different presentations with the hotels, but especially with extended stay, we have guests that may stay one day, but in most cases we're looking 5 to 7 days, and that guests will want to venture out. They'll want to go out and check out the area. So we took those considerations in, and not just saying, hey, here's one point that you can go out into. We have multiple points of connectivity out into it. Besides that, with the bike racks, which we have, we also typically will have bikes available for the guest use. I think that's one of the important things. We've had multiple points on there where you can see the bioretention areas. We have underground storm detention that will discharge off-site restricted rate. I think that was Commissioner Mills, you had brought up the EV charging stations. So we will have, it was just today, the architect and I, Benner and I were talking about it, figuring out where exactly those locations for the EV charging stations are. So even though, again, as you had mentioned, they're not required just per se, it's something that we've incorporated on every one of our projects, regardless of that. And they're encouraged by the brand, but really they're becoming norm. And so we'll be incorporating EV charging stations as well into the.
Get about 1 more minute, Mr. Andre.
Okay. Again, you can see the landscape plan, well landscape. We have a tremendous amount of landscape, streetscape. I did want to mention, even though the project was part of an approved zone, it was approved use, we did have a citizen participation meeting that we did put out, and we had quite a few attendees, most of them from the residential to the west, and we spent a lot of time. And one of the things was landscaping and traffic. We, as part of the landscape, you can see we have tons of landscaping that we've done that. In our traffic evaluation, what we found is we're not increasing the traffic with the background traffic with what we're adding. But I will say this, we did incorporate it on there. We are looking, and we'll work with staff to look at non-motorized pedestrian crossings and connections with those locations with on the ride with those routes. So we're looking at that to enhance that. If you can go on to the building, please. Maybe just go right to the elevations, Brett. So, and if Ben is available, if Ben can chime in and talk about the building a little bit. Brett, can you connect Ben?
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Andy, I think you've had previous conversations, and I know there was another colleague in the office that was speaking before, and one of the requests was the frontage there along Eisenhower. They wanted to create more of a frontage, so there was additional glazing, some of the additional key featured elements, one being the beacon that you see at the center there. And then the big thing too is just from the prototypical Home 2 version, we wanted to integrate upgraded materials. Typically, you're seeing EFIS as the standard field exterior material, and we've since the beginning we've changed that, upgraded that to a mainly masonry and cement board finish. So those are.
We are at 10 minutes.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We will now head to Mr. Kowalski for a staff report.
Okay, thank you. Good evening again. Okay, I just really want to touch on a couple of the highlights. As you've seen before you, the general details of the project, 115 rooms, 115 parking spaces. That's 1 space per room, which is the minimum that's required. A couple of the elements that I wanted to touch on as well, things that, as Mr. Andre had touched on regarding design elements and things that we've worked on from the beginning. He did mention briefly that some changes regarding the design, the site layout. Site was originally submitted with the parking lot in the front towards Eisenhower. The building pushed back a little bit. While that did meet zoning, because it did, our zoning code does require, it has a min and a max for office, but it only requires you to meet that on 1 public street. So so it did meet it on the signature boulevard. However, that was not consistent with other elements of our land use plan and design standards. So we encouraged them, and of course they did comply to what you see here before you today. So technically both sides do meet the maximum front setback for that. Elevations, again, that's something that we had some success pushing back on those elevations from what was originally submitted to what you see here before you today. One issue of note, the landscaping, particularly in my staff report, it was noted as unresolved. That has been resolved, that last remaining landscape issue. The plan was submitted towards the end of last week. It's been, or just after my staff report was completed, it has been reviewed and approved by the landscape reviewer. So there are no issues remaining as far as the landscaping in the bioretention areas that you see there. One thing of note also regarding the detention, there, I guess because the soils were not the best for infiltration, they do have to do I believe it's about a 20% penalty. If Mr. Andre can confirm that, but it's a 20% penalty due to the lack of the great infiltration on the site. So they are over detaining a little bit as well. One key note on this is regarding the non-motorized connections and pedestrian transportations, pedestrian access. As was pointed out a little bit by the petitioner, they also have agreed when traffic engineer had reviewed this proposal, and the city is looking at adding a non-motorized connection in that area, pretty close to that, which would be an RRFB beacon and, or RRFB, I should say. We did have some discussions a little while ago with the petitioner, and they've agreed to contribute the amount required for the installation of that RRFB. And however, the city will design and install it. So it wouldn't be something that would be installed directly with this project. However, if the project is ultimately approved, the contribution would be submitted probably before the first certificate of occupancy would be granted on this, and then design and construction. I mean, it may come about the same time, but it's not directly linked to the project. And those are kind of some of the highlights for the project. Again, this one is not a rezoning. It is just a standard project with a permitted use within the office district. Staff does recommend approval of the petition at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. And at this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed rezoning and site plan for the 361 West Eisenhower Boulevard site plan. Public comment may be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID number 941-3631-2895. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds. so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
No speakers for this public hearing.
Then I will go ahead and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Home 2 Hotel 361 West Eisenhower Parkway site plan and development agreement. Do I have a commissioner who will move this? Moved by Commissioner Briggs, seconded by Commissioner Woods, and we are in discussion. Commissioner Sauvé.
I'll start where I left off the last one. Maybe for staff or the petition, why 3 curb cuts?
Sure, I can touch on that. When you look at the configuration of the property, what we have is we have the length really along Signature, and to ensure that we have proper circulation, both for the garbage trucks, as well as we worked very diligently with the fire marshal to make sure that we had full circulation when it came for the fire trucks. We specifically needed the middle one and the south one for those full circulations. But as Mr. Kowalski had mentioned earlier, initially we had parking that was closer to Eisenhower, so we had some circulation there. But with the way the layout of the hotel goes, we're going to have to be able to circulate back and around. So the northern drive is an exit out only to the right. So it'll be exit out only to the north. So while it is 3, it's really like 2.5, and we do need those for circulation for emergency vehicles, as well as I think full circulation that we need for the guests as well. The locations were discussed with the transportation group. If you look at the center one, we located that directly across the street from the existing curb cut that's there, so that alignment works very well. When you look at the one to the south, you have no more drives at that point till you get past Waymarket. So that doesn't pose a conflict. So while there are 3, and I understand what you're saying, we really need them for the circulation purposes.
My other main concern, so you have snow storage on the south end of the site where it's also heavily landscaped. And I might also punt this to our landscape professional to weigh in. But I'm not sure how snow storage can actually build up where you've got a full buffer of landscaping there. And this is not to say you should pave more area to put snow somewhere, but I want to make sure that that's been covered, is that we actually have places for snow, that we're not sacrificing all these plantings.
Right.
So I don't know if that's a staff thing, but that seemed like an overlap, and they're not shown on the same sheet, so that was a kind of a concern. And my third is just maybe for staff, if they could give a hint to where that pedestrian crossing, if there is an initial idea of where that might land, since it starts to be a 3-lane with that turn. I'm just trying to imagine where it would end up in the future. I know it's not part of their scope, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't know exactly. That was a question. I had anticipated that. We don't know exactly, because like I said, they know that we want it in that general area. The press will call that out, but as far as which side or where you're going, the final design has not been completed at this time.
Okay.
And also regarding the snow storage, I'm sorry, I was flipping through the plan really quickly, but our landscape reviewer has commented on that numerous times in the past regarding putting snow storage within the landscape area. I was trying to flip back right now to make sure that this was covered. So if it's not, after discussion, I can bring that back up as well. So
yeah, so far how I read it, it hasn't been covered on that south end. So there is some on the north of the bottom L. some stores there that doesn't have
Yes.
landscaping, but I
Yeah.
don't think that's sufficient.
Right, I'll double check that as well.
Yeah, I do appreciate the like 3 sidewalks coming onto the site just to connect. I know they're like close together, but reinforcing kind of that pedestrian way. I might put this in Commissioner Proposed Business because this is along one of those T1 corridors that we've been looking at. And so, especially these extended stays in multiple hotels, like the idea of transit and reinforcing transit and the type of zoning is just really interesting. So 2 comments for the petitioner. We talked about EV. Another thing that we've been talking about is solar paneled carports as a way to get to zero carbon. So thinking about your parking spacing with footing, if you imagine, you know, instead of it increasing your electrical load, the service load, adding EV as you add carports with PV panels, all of those things can zero out simultaneously. But with those needing foundations, you have to make sure that your parking spaces are spaced out enough to accommodate that infrastructure to land in there. It just seems like a great place to do it, especially between the building and the park, to just let that be a workable landscape to grab energy. So what with EV, thinking about how that might be an administrative amendment, or so, you know, like there are certain square footage that you can do this without site planning in the future. So even if not now, keep an eye on it for the benefit, again, to your customers. And I guess that kind of comes, you talked about bike share. Can you describe that a little bit more? Like how that's going to function, how many bikes, and market research to the alternative transit?
Sure. So what I think, again, I think when you look at, number one, you look at the nature of what we have, extended stay. People are going to, especially, let's say you're in our, you're there during the week, especially look at this time of year, you look like a day like today, you're going to want to get out, you're going to want to explore. And especially with the location that we have, with the proximity, as we talked about, the dining, the shopping, but also to the park itself, there's a lot of amenities that surround us. And so one of the things that I think we see more in the extended stay are people going out in the area. One of the things that we had talked about is we do have bicycle parking that we've incorporated, obviously, as part of the standard that we have. But being able to have those, and when I say bike sharing, it's specific just to the guests that we have. So it's not as though you see at the different locations on that. But if we have bicycles that are available for the guests, they can check them out like they would check out towels to go to the pool, that type of thing. It's an extension of, rather than going into the fitness area, take the bike, go out and explore the area. And I think that's one of the things you see more and more is the amenities, and guests in particular. I think that's an attraction feature. You know, as you had mentioned, I think as Commissioner Mills had mentioned, what's a differentiation? Your hotel has EV charging stations. You have this. You have the different things. That right there is a differentiation. Being able to say, you know what, come into town, and when it's great, go check the bike out, and we'll see you when you get back. And so I think, you know, having those available for the guest use is something that is critical to, especially this extended stay. How
many do you have planned right now?
I think 2 right now.
Okay, 2 for 115.
Yeah.
And you do meet the minimum. You're at the minimum parking standards, and I'm just curious about that as well, right? We see some people.
The minimum parking standards. Mm-hmm. So let me. I don't want to go too deep, but I think this group would appreciate it very much. We are continuing to work especially in urban areas, and what we see. We've conducted parking studies at other locations, urban areas. I would say one recently was within the last couple of months in Grand Rapids. Okay, what we're seeing is the proximity in Grand Rapids. It's called the Rapid, right? That's their transportation. We had a letter of support saying, "Hey, we actually those locations for their stops were a little bit even further than what we have here, and they are projecting." we did a parking study, and we're projecting use there. What also you see is ride sharing. And that's one of the things I think is you're going to see the evolution within parking standards specifically to hotels. I'll tell you, Novi, the city of Novi just adopted a recent parking study or parking measures when it comes to the hotel, because they've recognized ride sharing, public transportation, two folks coming in from the airport sharing one vehicle. So even at 100% occupancy, we very rarely see even the parking lot full because of all those different things. And so while we do meet the minimum standard, and I'll tell you, that's number one, that's because that's your ordinance. And number two, that's what the brand likes to see. But in all reality, when you come to operationally, we rarely will have a full parking lot, even at 100% occupancy.
That's good to know. Just, yeah, to help with larger context beyond this project. So thank you.
So I have Commissioner Gabrandel, Commissioner Mills, and then Commissioner Ackerman.
So I want to circle back to the snow storage thing. I am actually having a really hard time finding where the snow storage is indicated on the plans. I have like the full set, that was in eTrackit. And so I see where the landscape areas are, but I'm just struggling to find where the snow storage is. And so I don't know within the presentation if there's a way to be able to show that, to share, or you can just describe. I'm assuming all along this south side, but the question is sort of where, if there's specific areas, or if it's all around that whole zone. So perhaps you could verbally describe them and see.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. So I think it's physically depicted on sheet C 3.0, and really it's situated along the southern parking areas to the south. And again, the reason it makes most sense is, like we talked about, that grade change. They're pretty much going to push snow downhill, right, and it's gonna be towards that bottom parking lot. So what we had looked at was snow storage around the perimeter of the we indicated it, we called it out in about, 4 or 5 different locations. But I think as one of the commissioners mentioned, I think there's maybe some additional or even better areas that can be indicated on here. We did work closely with so while it is indicated on here, and obviously it's something that they've reviewed, we still want to make sure that we're covering it. Because the last thing we want to do is be replacing plants. So it is indicated on the plans. It's been through several reviews, but we can always expand a couple areas.
And what is the name of the sheet? Just so I'm.
I think it's called Site Layout and Paving Plan C 3.0.
Okay. Okay, bear with me. Sorry. One of the things that's kind of striking me is that you could just shift sometimes it's just being able to have a place to pilot.
Yes.
And that if you moved your shrubs towards the back side of those, of that, it might work better than at the front side.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So,
I think it's a great idea.
For some reason, my C3 isn't loading, which is part of the problem.
That's okay.
So that might be just kind of a simple thing, to be able to do that. And some of the shrubs that I see that you have in there are quite salt tolerant. Some are not great. And so what you may do is just kind of review things with your landscape architect to be able to look for salt tolerance, and in the places where you are indicating it, that maybe you kind of switch some things around to be able to accommodate that. I know, for instance, like white pine are not going to be happy with a bunch of salty snow piled on them. But there are other things that tolerate it better. Nobody likes salty snow, but there are ones that are better than others. And so you might just, again, I think your choices are probably fine. It's just a question of maybe doing a little bit of rearranging in terms of, and also frankly, a bunch of snow piled on top of shrubs just means that you get a bunch of broken branches.
Yeah. Those are great points. We have no objections to anything like that. That'd be great.
So just, I think some, just with an eye towards that, moving some things around would be helpful.
We can work with staff. It would be no problem.
Yeah. And then my other question, I guess, is the park to the south. I've never been to this park. Is it developed at all? Like, are there pathways in here?
There are some pathways. I think they're going to There's some asphalt paths that are back through there. So when we
Okay.
talk, so when I had mentioned, the bicycle, that actually takes you, it cuts across from Signature all the way to Briarwood Circle. So there's a pathway that goes through there. There's a playground as well back through there. So so I think again, it's a great amenity to the area, and it fits very well.
Okay. So in other words, your planned connection is basically the sidewalk in the right of way to it. I was just wondering if there was any kind of pathway that ended up getting close to the north side of the park, south side of your property that you could kind of connect into, but it doesn't, it looks like it's showing up on your survey. So it's probably just more practical to stick to the right of way and connect in through that way.
I would agree.
Okay. Alrighty. I just was wondering if there was an opportunity to connect in through there, but obviously everybody's walking down the sidewalk anyway, or biking down the sidewalk anyway. I guess the other thing is that we did get an email communication from, it sounded like a neighbor about some of the traffic in there, and that there had been some issues with accidents in the past because it's only 2-lane. And I'm just wondering if you could, I don't know if you were privy to that comment or not about issues.
No, I can tell you that I'm sure it may have been part of the same group, or, as I mentioned, we had a citizen participation meeting early on, and two things that were brought up, and it's the same two things that most of every time. It's traffic and landscaping. Okay.
Right.
And so one of the things obviously that we did, and we evaluated the part of our traffic study, we looked at those. Neighbors a day, and we recognize that. One of the things, if you look, the background right now is congested. As far as the accidents, we didn't look into it. I don't think it was brought up during our accidents. Sure, anytime you have heavy traffic volumes, you're going to have, some circumstances there. So, but I was not aware of it.
So is Signature Boulevard, I've never driven up this before.
Sure.
Is this something that gets pretty backed? I mean, I'm very aware of Eisenhower, but I have no idea about Signature. And I know that it looks like a residential development off to the west.
Right.
Does Signature kind of pile up in terms of like rush hour times or anything like that? Like did you all have to do a traffic study for this or no?
We did do a traffic study. I'm looking at it. I'm actually looking at it right now. And I'm specifically to Signature. Okay. I'm going to speak just to Signature prior to Eisenhower. So this is on Signature. And I'm sure, again, please correct me if everybody doesn't understand, but I figure this group's very well educated on this level of services when it comes to it. It's operating an AM peak hour, a level of service A.
Okay.
In the afternoon, this would be, I'm sorry, northbound is a B, okay? And then in the afternoon, it's a B.
Okay.
So Signature itself probably is not as much of, it's probably more of a factor of Eisenhower.
Yeah, right.
What's going on there, yeah.
Okay, alrighty.
Commissioner Mills?
Thanks. I really appreciate your recognizing, and well, first of all, the type of hotel that this is fits with kind of the amenities that are around there. That there is a park adjacent, I think is really helpful for a longer stay. I think, contributing to the crossing, the pedestrian amenities there. I mean, this is along Eisenhower is a great place to bicycle or to run because there's not very many things like curb cuts coming in and out of Eisenhower. There's long stretches, so long runs. I think this is a really great place for people who want to get out and get out. I appreciate your kind of being proactive about thinking about adding some bikes that people can take out. I think that from that perspective it fits. I appreciate having the extensions from the sidewalk, up to the hotel. I think that kind of sets that tone that this is a place where we do walk. I don't think Eisenhower has always had that kind of atmosphere, and I think that this will actually be really good for it. And I hope that we see kind of more of this along there. I think that the design along Eisenhower, kind of in maybe you had the benefit of hearing the conversation from before, but I think, having windows on that northern facade is really helpful. And having some more interesting kind of facade is useful. It's difficult for me to tell from renderings, like whether I like this one or the last one better. I don't know. I leave it up to like architects and that kind of thing. But I appreciate that you recognizing that that is not a side, that is a front. And so I think that that's really important. The questions or the couple of comments that I had based on the conversation that you were having earlier with, I think Commissioner Sauvé had raised this about parking, and you were saying that like, you don't think that you're gonna see 115 cars in there. I wanna make sure that you're aware that you're allowed to defer parking. You don't have to build it all. And if you seriously don't think that you're going to use it, I think that that's a lovely option that I would encourage you to participate in. I can't remember what exactly percent you don't have to, you can defer, but it's 25, that's a question for staff, I guess, 25%?
It's 30%, I believe, but I'm going to double check that since I just said it on camera.
I was going to say it's somewhere on that order. So even if it's a row, 10 spots or something, like that's an option. And I don't think you're going to hear anybody on this call fight over, like complain about that. Like, that's great. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is that you are not required to provide Class C bicycle parking. This is the outside, the hoops that you have outside. I appreciate that you have that. I think that that's really, really useful. One of the questions that I have is our code, the only thing that's required is that Class A, which is kind of locked, covered locked. And I saw that you have it in room 104, which is like marked on the plans as a storage room. Is this your bike share bikes? Is this employee bikes? Like, what are you envisioning? Who do you think are going to use those spots?
No, I think that's a very good question. Let me go. I'll tell you. We worked with Mr. Kowalski pretty much on this, and this was a good one. Is that I'm going to be very frank with you. Those having them outside the building is kind of ugly. Some of them, the enclosures don't really fit with the buildings and what you're, we put a lot of effort and I know as a commission, you guys spend a lot of time looking at what these buildings look like. And then here's this parking out there that doesn't fit characteristically with what the building looks like. And so one of the things that we looked at and Matt and I talked quite a bit about was we have space within the building to fit those parking. Those bicycle parking. And so we would rather do that, not for the sense other than, hey, number one, it's nice and secure. It doesn't deter from anything going on with, the front of the building and how things look. So we have plenty of room within that area there that we can have, both the sharing as well as the required Class A within that area. So we have plenty of space there.
Well, I was going to say, maybe right now you don't know. Maybe this is something you advertise to people who bring it along. I would just say, like, honestly, in terms of where it is more accessible than some places that we see it. So kudos to staff. Thank you, Mr. Kowalski, for working with them to identify a place where maybe right now you don't know who's going to use it. I'm guessing that you may well have a staff member who likes to work, and like that's a safer, it's a better place to park it than out in the front. But that you put it in a place, you met the code, but you put it in a place that somebody might actually use it. Because it is kind of off of the main entrance. It's not in a tucked away, like down in the basement. So I hope it gets used. I hope that you're able to advertise this, particularly because you're branding yourself as this is a place where you can't, and you've already talked about some of the other bike things going on. So I like the site plan. I appreciate what Lee to about solar carports, and that is an opportunity to kind of like offset the draw that EVs have, like if you can add some power back onto the grid as well. And like, again, as you think about your parking lot and pave your parking lot, thinking about what infrastructure you might be able to put in place underneath to save yourself some money down the road, I think is useful. And as you space those parking spaces out, giving yourself a little leeway for the charging infrastructure or the supports for solar carports might be helpful as well. But thanks for a thoughtful site plan here.
Thank you.
I just wanted to jump in really quickly. I apologize, but for the clarification regarding the deferred parking, it's actually 40%. So, and for those that don't know, that's you basically, as long as it's shown on the approved site plan, they can defer it at any time. Well, they can defer it at any time. They don't have to construct that 40%. However, they can install it whenever they want without, other than just a grading permit, because the detention has been in there for it, landscaping is around it. So that's the idea behind that. So just wanted to clarify that statement.
Commissioner Ackerman, followed by Commissioner Briggs, and then Commissioner Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kowalski, for the clarification. I wanted to talk about deferment as well, and I think I'd just put a finer point to it. Would you be willing to defer parking? I think that's something that we've discussed a lot as a benefit. Impervious surface is something you can never get rid of, and it fights against a lot of the environmental goals we have as a city.
Sure, I have no problem. I can take that back. One of the things that that we are, I'll say, evolving is working with the brands as well to recognize and show them. It's easy when, I'll be honest, it's easy when you're in Novi, where Novi says you don't need all this parking, and you can point to an ordinance and say, look, Hilton, they said we can't have it, and we can't have it. When it's usually optional or deferred, it's a little bit more of a challenge. I think it's something certainly we will go back and investigate, and we have no problem working with staff on that.
A clarifying question. For an equivalent zoning district in Novi, are you required to have more or less parking?
Less parking. The way they have done it is, I think you guys should obviously take a look at it. They have reduced parking, as well as when you have reduced parking, they've increased the open space requirements as well.
That is shocking. Novi was like a farm town until the 80s, when it just became flat subdivisions and strip malls, and some hotels as well, and a very suburban style of development. And so if they require less parking than we do, and we hold ourselves to be a progressive city trying to adopt best practices in urban planning, that we are way behind the 8 ball.
Mr. Leonard, then Commissioner Briggs, and then Commissioner Woods.
I would add, based on the references, I did some quick research. As a comparison, the city of Novi, we require 1 parking space per unit, per room, flat. The way Novi's updated ordinance requires that they require 0.85 spaces for every room, plus an additional space for every employee of their largest shift. So the equivalent of parking for their requirements for this hotel, based on my quick research of it, would be 97 spaces plus the 1 extra space for every employee of their largest employee shift. I don't know what that is. They do have some provisions to provide a lot of flexibility for reducing loading area as well for hotels. Yeah. So just comparison.
Thank you very much for the data point. That's super compelling. Having spent a fair amount of time in Novi, we're so much more walkable. We have so much more access to transit, and we got to catch up and push further than 0.85. Thanks.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we're going to get a lot of leverage out of that new fact. But the one piece I wanted to push a little bit further on, and I appreciate all the things that everybody's commented on before. The one piece that I feel like is actually could go a little further, and I just wonder if there's any willingness to, is that front facade. In my sense, it's about halfway to where our last project was. Like it kind of meets in between, and there's a real opportunity to start changing that street face on Eisenhower. And I'm just wondering if there's, you can kind of see what that last project, you were able to see what that last project did in terms of some of the amenities and I'm curious what your thoughts are around that, and if there's any opportunity to move a little further. I kind of got the sense that maybe staff had maybe wanted to see a little bit more happening there, but maybe I was incorrectly reading between the lines.
Sure. Let me just run real quick about that, and then Ben can jump in and talk a little bit about the design. It's difficult because we've seen the iterations. We live this project. You guys are seeing it for the first time. If you would have seen the evolution of where we started to where we are now, where we've emphasized, provided another emphasis for entry, and that I think you would have some appreciation for what for where that journey has gone, and where staff really, and I'm going to be very frank, they were emphatic about moving us towards this. So where we started to where we are, I think is a plus. What more we can do, I'll let Ben talk a little about how we can discuss that a little bit more.
Okay, yeah, just thank you, Andy. I think one of the struggles with this, with the layout and the update for this project specifically, Hilton, specifically for the Home 2, has a signature element. They call it their beacon. It's usually located near their main entry, and they were very apprehensive, even in regards to the updates to the end of the building, which would be the frontage there that you're speaking of. We went back and forth quite a bit with Hilton, and based on some of the requirements, the recommendations from the city, we met, I believe, the glazing requirements. And it's what's difficult with the layout on this property is we have the guest rooms all on each end of the building with the public space between. So it was tough for us. We wanted to provide more glazing, but the layouts for the guest rooms, typically on the ends they're the suite rooms, which were the premium, and with furniture layouts, things like that, typically we could not provide any more glazing than what we have shown. But I believe that taking some of their signature elements, bringing them to that facade, I think we have a pretty successful solution. But like I said, it's very tough sometimes with the brand. They don't want to give up their identity. So I think we compromised, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the efforts that were made in terms of imagining what the building facade maybe looked like previously. I think that even some of those elements from like the last project that we saw in terms of having a trellis there were some elements there that just help to I'm not sure what a nice architectural term is, but from my perspective, make it a little more friendly. It's kind of that experience that you have with the building if you're on the sidewalk or that space. And so if there are elements like that can be brought in, I think it goes a long way to making you feel good about where you're at, but also connecting people with that space a little bit more. And it seems like a win-win.
Yeah, there might be potential, like you said, with the trellis that we have at the front entry. If there's a complementary version of that could be instituted on along the front-facing facade as well. I'm not sure. I don't have that last project memorized. I'm not sure how much space, or if that was their main entry where we were seeing that additional.
Yeah, it was not their main entry, but
Okay.
Again, I'm not exactly sure what the
Yeah.
what the differences are in spacing either. But
I think Commissioner Briggs, I think we can look at something like, I think Ben mentioned, we have some of that feature at the front entry, which would be the west elevation. We can look at, maybe bringing something around to that entry as well. I think we could work with staff to go through that.
thank you.
Commissioner Briggs.
Woods?
Sorry, Commissioner Wood.
Just a couple of questions. One, in terms of the parking, you may want to consider whether or not you want to defer it as you think about the fact that this could be an area that people will be coming, particularly during football seasons. And also that I know that sometimes the areas to park down there on Signature Boulevard and Way Market, I think goes around there. They can sometimes, people are sort of parking on the streets because they want, it's within walking distance of the stadium if you don't mind walking that far. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your lighting is going to look like? You know, what you're planning for that area. And I must say, I'm having a hard time envisioning what the outside of your building is going to look like. So perhaps before you go to City Council, you may want to just see if you can flesh that out a little bit better, just so people can really see what it's going to look like. But if you could just talk to us a little bit about the lighting right now.
Sure, absolutely, that's great. I'm sorry, you know what, I did skip over that during the, so we have lighting, we did have a lighting, site lighting and photometric plan, sheet C 3.1 that was included in the plan. All LED lighting, everything is LED area lighting. And we also do have some bollard lighting, walkway lighting that goes along near the building. So, you know, obviously that lights the sidewalk around the perimeter. So we have a mix of the bollard lighting as well as the area lighting. The photometric plan was submitted, met all the criteria, and it's, you know, it's much easier to do with the LED lighting. You know, we do incorporate the photo cells into it so that it picks up when the I meant to say motion, the photocell motion detectors, we do incorporate those. So when it doesn't pick up any motion, the lighting levels will drop a little bit. And then as maybe somebody comes out or something, you know, somebody comes out to the car, it will ramp up. So what we're doing is we're actually cutting down on the usage, the power usage, as well as any perceived light pollution as well. So we do incorporate those onto the area lighting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Thank you. First, Mr. Andre, just thank you very much. That presentation was great. I really appreciate the context that you provided as well based on the last discussion. Just a couple things. I'm going to echo what Commissioner Briggs said. I totally appreciate, I can tell that this went through many, many, many iterations. So kudos also to staff for that. It would be good to see, I think, you know, the last project we just saw did considerable enhancements to their facade, also a home too. So I think anything that you can do, you know, and maybe it's not even changing the building, maybe it is something softer with like the landscaping, but to really make it feel like it's the front, and when people walk by it, it just is a little more interesting to look at, or there's a little something else there. I think that would help tremendously. And then my only other thing, and this is maybe just a point of clarification, and this is also sort of based on the public comment that we got regarding the traffic and the lining up to turn and the 3 curb cuts. Can you talk about how you envision, so say you are driving a car to the site, the top 2 curb cuts, I couldn't really tell this from the plan, is that envisioned to be like a porte cochere? Like would somebody come in and check in and then leave and go park? Or what are you sort of envisioning?
Right, so that's a great question. And one of the things on sheet C 3.0, Commissioner Hammerschmidt, if you look at that, we did, you can see some overlays of vehicle turning. In particular, if you look on the left-hand side, what we're a little bit challenged with is if you look at Signature coming where it intersects with Eisenhower, it's an island. It's a divided road, okay? And so that, you know, made us take a look at, how are we going to get people around this? So what we envision is folks will be coming in and go in the middle drive, then they'll be able to swing in under the porte cochere. And that, if you can look, and if you see, we provided kind of a little turnaround, and we actually did a turning template in that, so that pedestrian vehicles would be able to turn around without having to go onto Signature, so not going back onto the road, but stay in internal circulation to stay on our property and then come back and park in the parking field to the south. So again, come in the middle driveway. They'll be able to come under the porte-cochere, and they'll be able to stay on the property, swing back around, and head to where all the parking is.
Okay, I see that now. My computer was being really slow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That is
Thank you.
really helpful, and that's really good to know.
So I really love the idea of deferred parking here. Since you're able to get away with in the city of Novi not providing this this much parking, I'm all in favor of you deferring it. So hopefully by the time you arrive at City Council, hopefully you'll figure out a way to defer some parking. So I'm completely in favor of that. Thank you, Commissioner Mills, for bringing that up. All right, further discussion. Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Woods bringing up the lighting issue, which is something that we've been trying to focus in on. And we are just in the process of updating our lighting ordinance to be more dark skies compliant and really being conscious of the light trespass onto different properties, including, parks and things like that. And so one of the benefits of LED lights is that they are more energy efficient, but as we've done a lot of, assessments of, their illumination and light readings are also just a lot more brighter. And so could you talk about just the fixtures for a second in terms of if you're thinking about them being dark skies compliant, and if just in terms of kind of how you're placing the lighting on the site, if it's being cognizant of where that's going to be directed, which is obviously you want it on your parking lot and folks where your guests are going to be, but.
Sure, I'm actually looking up the fixture as we speak right now.
Great, thanks.
So one of the things that we're looking at is truth be told, we want to limit how much lighting that we have on there. Every pole that we put in or electricity that we use is a cost. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're ensuring safe, access and comfort for our guests as well. Typically, when I'd say they're about. We typically put them around the perimeter of the parking lot. I think that offers us the best illumination of the parking areas. They're typically about 100 feet from pole to pole. Okay, and we're looking at only 20-foot high poles too. So we're not looking at something that's drastically sticking out. It's nothing that you would see obviously at Briarwood or anything like this. But the LED offers us that, and that's what I said. They are cutoff type fixtures, and so it really makes meeting the requirements much easier than what it used to be. So 20-foot high poles, about 100 foot every 100 feet. Now, one of the things I think, and I'm not sure how other developments are doing it, but we've also incorporated the bollard lighting that along the walkways. So that provides local area lighting that really reduces the need for poles as well in those areas. And those local area lighting will, not just the walkways, but they go out into the parking areas as well. So I think the mix of what we're having, those are LEDs as well. That they really provide us the opportunity to not only meet the standards, but to really reduce the number of lights that typically you'd see on a property like this.
And were you able to see if they were dark, if the lights you were doing, what their fixtures were, or is that something that if you find out in between now and when the city council, I think it's a relatively easy sort of shift to make, but just something we're really trying to emphasize.
No, and that's no problem. And I think we can do that because that, if you went back 10 years ago, that was kind of a tough standard to meet, just because of the number of fixtures that were out there. But I think with the way things have come, I haven't been able to locate it just yet, but I can certainly take a look through it between now and later on. And if that's a change that we can make easily, which I don't see it being a problem, that we would be able to do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mills?
This is just tacking on to that. Can you tell if there's any facade lighting?
Are you talking about like upward lighting or anything onto the building itself?
Yeah.
I know Ben, I don't think we have anything on this particular brand, do we?
You know, Andy, as far as I'm aware, the only at those beacon elements,
The beacon.
the beacon, those are actually there's a vertical strip that would be self-illuminated, just a very light glow. But beyond that, I think that's all there is.
Nothing building mounted or uplit or anything like that. It just, as Ben had mentioned, when you look at the building elevations, you can see the beacon. That's that area where you can have that lighter green. That's kind of like he had mentioned. It's self-illuminated within, but nothing projecting upwards or out from the building.
Okay, great. That's something that's not typically shown on our photometric plans, are like the lights that are put on the buildings themselves. So, but that is something just for your education for the next project in Ann Arbor that hopefully our lighting ordinance would cover, is also making sure that, you know, floodlights or that kind of thing on the building itself is not causing light pollution.
Commissioner Mills, I will say this: if you look at our lighting plan, the only thing that we do have are flagpole lights, which we are, and those are indicated on the plan and were incorporated within our photometric design.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no other commissioners raising their hands, I think we're ready for a vote. Mr. Leonard, will you please do a roll call?
Commissioner Briggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrandel,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Woods.
Yes.
It carries.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, we are moving to the next item on our agenda, which is 10B. City-initiated annexations, proposed zoning for city council approval. And is Mr. Khan joining us, or Mr. Leonard, are you doing the presentation?
Jeff will be joining us here in a moment.
Okay. Jeff, you just want to unmute yourself, please.
Here we go. All right. Can everybody hear me? Great. Thanks for having me. I do have a brief staff report. Also happy to answer any questions that you might have. Some of you are familiar with this effort we've been working on for quite a few years now. Others might be somewhat new to it. A few years ago, City Council directed staff to begin gradually annexing over 500 township island parcels within the city's ultimate service area. The city staff, mostly planning and public services, began that process a number of years ago. We brought our very first round of petitions to the Boundary Commission a number of years ago. That was approved about 3 or 4 years ago. It included 20 parcels in Ann Arbor Township. Around 2 petitions were submitted to the State Boundary Commission about a year ago, and it included about 87 parcels from Ann Arbor Township, Pittsfield, and Scioto Townships. It went to the Boundary Commission in October. The commission recommended approval of 26 vacant Scioto Township parcels, but it recommended denial for parcels in Ann Arbor and Pittsfield Townships. The director of LARA concurred with this recommendation from the Boundary Commission and approved only the 26 vacant parcels in Ann Arbor Township.
Scioto Township.
excuse me, Scioto Township. Thanks, Brett. This petition before you is a petition to zone these 26 parcels that have already been annexed into the city of Ann Arbor. And so, as you can see from the staff report attachment, there's a cluster of parcels in the Dexter Road area that are proposed to be zoned R1C. And then you'll see a cluster of parcels just east of Wagner that are proposed to be zoned R1D. All of these parcels are within established neighborhoods that already have that zoning district. So they're just part of an existing neighborhood with established zoning. So what is before you is the zoning portion of this effort. So staff recommends that the petitions be approved because the parcels are within the city's ultimate service boundary. The proposed zoning districts are consistent with the uses and intent of the R1C and R1D zoning districts and are compatible with surrounding zoning districts. And so that's what I have. Brett, thank you for bringing up the illustrations, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed rezoning of 26 parcels recently annexed into the city of Ann Arbor. Public comment may be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID 941-3631-2895. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
No speakers.
Okay. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will read the proposed motions that we have this evening, and we have 2 of them. Motion number 1, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve 560 Allison Drive, 570 Allison Drive, 404 Barber Avenue, 410 Barber Avenue, 2570 Dexter Road, 2576 Dexter Road, 2582 Dexter Road, 3214 Dexter Road, 2510 Miller Road, 410 Parkwood Street, 2565 Valley Drive, and 2850 Valley Drive for rezoning to R1C single family dwelling. Motion number 2, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve 3428 Porter Street, 147 South Wagner Road, 167 South Wagner Road, 175 South Wagner Road, 225 South Wagner Road, 235 South Wagner Road, 255 South Wagner Road, 261 South Wagner Road, 363 South Wagner Road, 367 South Wagner Road, 371 South Wagner Road, 153 Westover Street, 221 Westover Street, and 260 Westover Street for rezoning to R1D single family dwelling. We'll have a commissioner who will move. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. And we are in discussion. Commissioner Gibrandal.
First of all, thank you for having the patience to read that. I wonder which was worse, the motions for the, the dispensaries or those,
Definitely the dispensaries.
I'm just wondering, I'm noticing that this is in the dioxin plume area, and I'm wondering, Mr. Khan, if you just happen to know off the top of your head whether most of these properties had wells on them, or were they already kind of part of the city system in terms of water hookup?
To our knowledge, none of them have wells. They're all vacant.
Okay.
And if someone wanted to build on their home, they could connect into city water.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? Seeing no one, I think we're ready for a vote. Mr. Leonard, let's do a roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Woods,
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I think reading the motion was the longest part of this item. All right, moving on to audience participation. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any issue. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
I see no speakers.
Okay. Moving on to commission proposed business, and I think Commissioner Sauvé had an item during the agenda or during the meeting.
I actually have a few. One, I want to talk about the master planning committee and maybe the committee conversion for the A20 carbon neutrality plan. Maybe it's something during working session we discuss about how that committee might transition or reassigning committees. Transit corridors, I think, it's kind of been tabled, but as we're seeing density and petitioners talk about the benefits of it, I think it's something that we should kind of reestablish what uses around it to prepare for that conversation, hopefully in the future. And third commission business, I would like to put to maybe a working session, possibly similar to the other kind of I forget what the other like brainstorming session we did that was much more kind of casual, that we were spitfiring like a lot of things, but around land use. I think given the circumstances and the kind of heightened awareness of how very subtle things have impacted equity in our nation, single family housing is substantially one of them, and other types of land use versus form use. And so even this past one, talking about single family use and thinking about a single family having to carry the cost burden of a land parcel. And so I think it is worth a working session to put on our agenda a way to think high level about ways to tackle and review our ordinances and how they might, in subtle and more direct ways, be against a lot, some of those social issues that we're really kind of putting pressure on right now.
Commissioner Mills.
This is opening a can of worms that we never want to open, but it's on parking. And because I know, as you read earlier on, next meeting, we're going to be talking about requiring a lot of EV infrastructure for parking that's built. It would be great if it didn't get built in the first place. No parking got built. It would save petitioners money. And so I particularly if we know that there are parking minimums in places that Novi can do with less hotel parking than we can, it seems like I think we might want to talk about some kind of relief. Not necessarily to water down the EV infrastructure needs, but to, again, not require that they build it in the first place. So I think that this is going to come up, honestly, 2 weeks from now. I don't know what we can do. I mean, it's a thorny issue, and I really don't want to hold up the EV ordinance too long for that. But I know we've given tons of discussion about this in the past, about I don't know if we're ready to move to maximums rather than minimums, or at least lowering some of our minimums. So.
Noted. My initial thoughts are that, we do have some maximums now, but we also do have minimums with most categories. I don't think that identifying that as an aspiration in any way compromises the EV parking. I think the way that that is established, it is reflective of those parking requirements by percentages. So as long as those resonate with ultimately you and city council, as parking standards are adjusted, I think those are sort of a live reflection of whatever those standards are. So, my initial thought is I don't think that they need to be together, and I don't think the work on EV would be compromised if we follow with parking discussions. I will also note that oftentimes there is a bit of a delay, and we do have a caller now raising their hand. If the commission is open to it, I would suggest that we accommodate that.
Yes, let's go ahead and.
Hello, caller. Ending with numbers 118. You have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Hello, my name is Milt Baker, and I wanted to talk and reinforce what Commissioner Mills said at the top of this discussion tonight about EV readiness. I really think you should be taking EV readiness, looking at these new hotel constructions from a standpoint of EV readiness. I think it's very good for the community. I support EV readiness in all aspects. I drove an EV from Florida back to Michigan, and one of the reasons that I chose to stay at the hotels that I did was because they had chargers, and it's really convenient to drive all day and then get charged up overnight and you're ready to go in the morning. So, I hope in the future that I know there was discussion about putting in conduit and everything, but I think that having just a few chargers is not the right way to go for hotels. And also, as you talk about parking structures and everything. And the reason I wanted to make this point is, and I think Commissioner Mills made it, she said this is coming to the city, but these hotels tonight are grandfathered in. If it's the right thing to do, I think we should be doing it now and not waiting. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your listening to me. That's all for now.
Thank you very much for calling in. We really appreciate it. Heading back to Commission Proposed Business, and I think Commissioner Woods, you had your hand up.
I did, and I just was wondering whether or not Commissioner Ackerman can give us a sense as to whether or not there's any appetite on council for looking at these maximums and minimums in terms of, sorry, I had to ask, in terms of parking. I mean, because we might as well know what the lay of the land is before we begin to attempt to put a lot of effort into this as well. Do you want to pass?
Yeah, I wish I could give you a firmer answer. I these days I have a hard time figuring that out myself. So perhaps in some of these kind of outlining zoning districts that aren't so close to the downtown core and the adjacent neighborhoods, maybe where it's like a 1-to-1 ratio of unit to apartment, we can use data looking at communities like Novi making reforms like this at the same time, like hopefully, but I have a hard time saying.
Thanks.
Mr. Leonard.
Just to follow up on some of the comments, I think I don't know that a final determination has been made, but I think that in the context of moving forward with a comprehensive master plan update, I would just say it seems more challenging now to envision that contract being executed in the context of the real financial adjustments that the city is having to make in the context of response to COVID and what's been happening. Again, that's it sort of lies above me and with sort of the administrator and council at this point to be making those decisions. However, given that it has been previously tabled and we are now in a position where we need to really make some prioritization of resources, I would just say that I am less optimistic that we'll be able to move forward in that endeavor as we originally aspired to. That said, I think that the notion of perhaps scheduling some time with the master plan subcommittee is probably apropos to that. In that landscape, talking about some of the recent goals set forth in the carbon neutrality plan, and if we can't perhaps move forward in the same aspirational way that we hope to, what bites or components might we want to start with, perhaps on a smaller scale. So I'm happy to do that. And then I'm also, of course, happy to schedule a time on the working session as if that's the interest of the commission, we could try to, I'd probably just frame a conversation as opposed to a lot of recommendations at this point, just to as what you was indicated, just to start talking about how land use generally, and certainly our land use, how that reflects some of the equity and particularly racial challenges in our community.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, just to speak a little bit more to the master plan update. Obviously, having sat on that committee, selection committee, I think this is a real casualty of the coronavirus. Obviously, there are many more serious ones, but it's really disappointing to see this potentially postponed for a couple of years, given, I think, how divided the community is around issues on development. I was really looking forward to starting this process. But I was wondering, have you given any thought to how many sunk costs are already in this and being able to articulate? I mean, I know there was a lot of staff time that went into that process, and what that would cost the city to reinitiate that process later on, I think is an important thing that would be useful to communicate. And I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, in short, I haven't done that analysis, and I guess I would want to be, I also want to recognize that I agree. I think a lot of great work was gone into it. And again, I'm not the final arbiter of that decision. Something could change. I'm just sort of, this is my sense of where we're headed. I could do that. I guess at this point, my intention isn't necessarily to perhaps sort of pile on already difficult decisions that we are having to face as a council resource-wise. I think that that is something that if you're interested, I'm happy to put it together. It was a lot of time. I certainly don't feel like it was wasted time. I think I feel like I learned a lot. I think that committee learned a lot about if we move forward or how we move forward in the future. I think that's compelling. I think you're right. As time goes by, there would probably be a need to replicate that process on some level. But I think I think it also provided a great sort of template as to a creative way about how we could approach that in the future.
Is there another way as well, if this is delayed for a while, in terms of, is there a way that it could be delayed where it would not have to go through the same sort of bidding process and the same, I mean, obviously the quotes, none of those, another cost would be similar a couple of years from now. But obviously there was a lot of work that went in from a team perspective to identify, from a community perspective, to identify the appropriate team. Is there any possible way to hold on to that?
I mean, again, we'll learn from it. We can't hold on to it. I think as time passes, the likelihood of reliance upon it probably wanes, not only for this sort of, the scope might evolve with what we seek at whatever time it's sort of reignited. Also, I don't think it's, not only from a staff perspective, a lot of respondent teams spent a lot of time putting together responses and spending time talking to us. I don't, while I would say anything's possible, the likelihood of them being able to also sort of carve out that space for a long term is probably difficult just from their business management, frankly. That said, I'm sure that they'd be interested in re-engaging conversations at that time. I think it probably would start anew again, because who knows what other parameters are going to be at play. I think also whatever happens, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we are delivering a good recommendation to how we move forward at that particular moment in time too. So there might be reasons that we want to start anew or sort of start from a different approach. Again, I feel like I'm dancing around this. It's not been definitively decided. I do feel like it's sort of writings on the wall in that regard. So.
Any other commission proposed business? Seeing nobody, I believe we have an organizational meeting at our first meeting in July. Is that correct, Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, you gotta figure out who's gonna read all those motions.
Yep. So that will be coming up at our next meeting. So just FYI to the commission.
And you cannot hold an office for more than 2 consecutive years. So change is afoot.
Very, very excited for that. All right. So our next meeting is July 7th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I hope all of you have a great July 4th holiday. I can't believe it's already middle of June, and I'll be seeing you guys after that holiday. So take care, have a great time, and do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Briggs. I'm assuming there's no discussion on adjournment, so we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.